The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was quiet except for the soft humming of translation devices. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat in their special chairs, each designed for their unique bodies. The air smelled of different gases that each species needed to breathe. Ambassador Kethvar stood in the center of the circular room. His blue skin was pale with worry, and his forearms shook slightly as he held the datapad. The Valerian had always been calm and peaceful, but today fear filled his large black eyes. Honored members of the council, Kethvar began, his voice carrying through the speakers in dozens of different languages. We face the end of everything we know. The representatives shifted in their seats. The tall, crystal-like lithoids made soft ringing sounds. The gas cloud nephili floating in their containment suits flickered with nervous energy. Even the ancient Zentarans who had lived for thousands of years looked worried. Kethvar activated his datapad, and holographic images filled the air above the council floor. They showed star systems, but something was wrong. Where planets should have been, there was only empty space and strange moving shadows. 3 months ago, the Devourer swarm reached the Outer Rim territories. Kethvar continued. 17 star systems have been completely consumed. Not conquered, not occupied, consumed. The images changed to show the creatures themselves. They looked like giant insects, but made of metal and flesh combined. Their ships were not built but grown, like living things that fed on matter and turned it into more of themselves. They eat everything, Kethvar said, his voice breaking. Planets, moons, asteroids, space stations. They take all the matter and use it to make more of their kind. They don't want to rule us or steal from us. They want to eat us and everything we have ever built. Council Speaker Veltara, an ancient Zentaran whose skin looked like tree bark, spoke in a voice as old as mountains. What do the military experts say? Surely our combined fleets can stop these creatures. Kethavar's shoulders dropped. Admiral Zektor led a joint fleet of 800 ships to stop them at the Cordon system. They were completely destroyed in less than 6 hours. The swarm took the metal from our ships and made it part of themselves. The council chamber erupted in panicked sounds. The lithoids rang like broken bells. The nephili flashed bright colors of fear. The small furry keplins squeaked and huddled together. Order! Order! Speaker Veltara called out. We must think clearly. There must be a solution. Council member Thaisara, a tall being with 6 legs and silver skin, stood up. We could retreat to the galactic core, build strong defenses around our most important worlds, and let them consume half the galaxy? Kethvar asked. They grow stronger with every planet they eat. If we wait, they will become too powerful to stop. Another council member, Lord Quexton of the Aquatic Aquarians, suggested, perhaps we could negotiate. Offer them uninhabited worlds to consume instead of our colonies. Kethvar shook his head sadly. They don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They just consume and grow and consume more. Our scientists think they might have eaten their own homeworld long ago. Now they just move from galaxy to galaxy, eating everything. The council fell silent. These were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had ended wars with words, cured diseases with science, and explored the mysteries of space with peaceful cooperation. But none of them knew how to fight something that could not be reasoned with. Speaker Veltara spoke slowly. How long do we have? If they continue at their current speed, Kethvar said, they will reach the core worlds in 6 months. Maybe less if they find ways to move faster. The silence stretched on. Each representative looked at their datapads, searching for answers that did not exist. Their civilizations had grown beyond the need for large militaries. They solved problems with technology and wisdom, not violence. Finally, a small voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It was Pipara, the youngest council member, representing the bird-like aviarians. What about the humans? The entire chamber turned to stare at her. Several representatives made sounds of shock and disgust. The Deathworlders? Lord Quexton said with horror. Those primitive savages who only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. They're barbarians, added Thaisara. They come from a world so dangerous that most of us need special suits just to visit. They fight wars over resources that we could easily share. They actually enjoy violence. Pipara's feathers ruffled, but she continued. But they win their wars. They survive on a world that would kill most of us in minutes, and they have something we don't. What? Speaker Veltara asked. They know how to fight, Pipara said simply. Not just with weapons, but with their minds. They think like predators because they come from a world full of predators. Maybe that's what we need. The chamber erupted again, but this time with angry voices instead of fear. We cannot ask those monsters for help, Tissera declared. They would probably try to conquer us themselves, Lord Quexton added. But Kethvar was staring at the images of the destroyed star systems. His people were dying while the council argued. What choice do we have? He asked quietly. Our greatest minds have no answers. Our strongest fleets have failed. If we do nothing, everything dies. Speaker Veltara looked around the chamber. The fear in every representative's eyes told her everything she needed to know. All in favor of contacting the human government for military assistance? One by one, reluctantly, the representatives raised their hands or made their species gesture of agreement. Even those who hated the idea knew that death was worse than asking for help from deathworlders. The motion passes, Speaker Veltara announced. Ambassador Kethvar, you will compose and send the message to the human capital world. May the ancient spirits help us all. As the council members left the chamber, Kethvar remained behind, staring at the holographic images of destruction. Tomorrow he would send a message that had never been sent before in galactic history, advanced civilizations asking primitive deathworlders for help. He just hoped the humans would answer before it was too late. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the communication alert started beeping. The bridge of the UES Titan's Edge was quiet except for the soft hum of engines and the occasional click of keyboards. They were 3 days out from Earth, mapping a new star system that might have planets suitable for human colonies. Captain, called out Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission on the diplomatic frequency. It's not from Earth. Jake set down his coffee and walked over to her station. Aliens? Yes, sir. The computer is working on translation, but it's definitely not human. The signal is really strong, like they're broadcasting to the entire galaxy. Jake had been in space for 15 years, first as a military officer and then as an explorer. Humanity had met a few alien species since discovering faster-than-light travel, but most contact was limited to simple trade or brief meetings. No alien civilization had ever sent an official message to Earth. Put it on the main screen when translation is ready, Jake ordered. A few minutes later, the image of Ambassador Kethvar appeared on the bridge view screen. The blue-skinned alien looked tired and worried as he spoke in careful, slow English. To the government and people of Earth, Kethvar began. I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Galactic Council. We send this message in desperate need of assistance. A force called the Devourer Swarm is consuming entire star systems in our galaxy. Our military forces have failed to stop them. We humbly request military aid from humanity. Time is critical. Please respond as soon as possible. The message ended and the bridge fell silent. Jake's crew stared at the screen in shock. Did he just ask us to fight aliens? Amy asked. Sounds like it, Jake replied. He turned to his navigation officer. Set course for Earth, maximum speed. Send this message ahead of us on all military frequencies. Priority 1. 36 hours later, Jake was sitting in a briefing room in the Pentagon, watching as the most powerful people on Earth argued about the alien message. President Alex Rodriguez sat at the head of the table, looking calm but serious. Admiral Lisa Carter, head of the Earth Defense Force, was studying star charts on her data pad. General Sam Bennett was already talking about troop movements. This could be a trap, said Secretary of Defense Maria Gonzalez. How do we know these aliens aren't trying to trick us into leaving Earth undefended? Dr. Nina Foster, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, shook her head. I've been studying the data they sent us about this Devourer Swarm. These creatures are real, and they're exactly what the ambassador described. Biological weapons designed to consume matter and reproduce. If they exist, they're a threat to every living thing in the galaxy. President Rodriguez looked at Admiral Carter. What's your assessment? Admiral Carter stood up and activated a holographic display showing Earth's military forces. We have 250 warships spread across our local systems. 50,000 ground troops trained for hostile environment combat. Our weapons are designed for fighting on deathworlds and in space. If these aliens are telling the truth about facing an enemy that eats planets, then our military doctrine is actually perfect for this situation. Explain, the president said. Most alien civilizations we've met are peaceful, Carter continued. They solve problems through technology and negotiation. Their weapons are precise and clean. Their military strategies focus on minimal casualties and protecting infrastructure. She pointed to images of human warships. Our ships are built for total war. We design weapons to destroy enemies completely, not to capture them or negotiate with them. We train soldiers to fight in the worst possible conditions because Earth taught us that the universe is trying to kill us. General Bennett nodded. Every human soldier learns to fight when outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of supplies. We practice for worst-case scenarios because that's normal for us. Dr. Foster added, from what I can tell about this swarm, they've never faced prey that fights back effectively. They're used to consuming civilizations that try to preserve life and minimize destruction. They don't know how to handle an enemy that's willing to sacrifice everything to win. President Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see him thinking about the biggest decision in human history. If we do this, the president finally said, we're announcing to the galaxy that humanity is a military power. That changes everything about our relationship with alien civilizations. It might also save those civilizations from extinction, Admiral Carter replied. The president looked around the table. I need opinions. Do we help them? One by one, his advisors gave their views. The military leaders wanted to fight. The scientists were curious about alien technology. The diplomats worried about consequences. Finally, President Rodriguez made his decision. We help them, not because we want to be the galaxy's military, but because letting innocent people die when we could help is not who we are. He turned to Admiral Carter. You have command of this operation. Take whatever forces you need. Rules of engagement are simple. Protect the innocent and destroy the threat. Admiral Carter saluted. Yes, sir. I'll need Captain Morrison as my liaison with the aliens. He's the only human who's actually spoken to them. Within hours, the largest military mobilization in human history was underway. Shipyards that built cargo vessels switched to making warships. Factories that made mining equipment started producing weapons. Military bases that had been quiet for years suddenly filled with soldiers, preparing for a war unlike any they had trained for. Jake found himself promoted to fleet commander and assigned to Admiral Carter's flagship, the UES Defiance. As Earth's fleet prepared to leave the solar system, he looked out at the ships gathering near the moon. Angular gray vessels designed for war, ships that looked dangerous even when they weren't fighting. Think we can do it? Amy Rodriguez asked. She had requested transfer to his ship and was now his communications officer. Jake watched a squadron of fighters practice attack formations against imaginary enemies. I don't know if we can win, he said, but I know we'll fight harder than these devourers expect, and sometimes that's enough. The fleet departed Earth 3 days later, 200 ships carrying humanity's answer to a desperate plea for help. They were heading into the unknown to fight an enemy that consumed planets. But they were human, and humans had learned long ago that sometimes the only choice was to fight or die. They chose to fight. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kessan system, and Jake Morrison immediately knew they were too late. The beautiful blue world that intelligence reports described was now a brown, scarred planet covered in strange structures that pulsed with organic light. Admiral, called out Communications Officer Amy Rodriguez, we're receiving a transmission from the planet surface. It's the Valerian Defense Commander. Admiral Lisa Carter's face appeared on Jake's screen from her flagship. Put him through to both ships. The image of Commander Zefkai appeared, his blue skin marked with cuts and his elegant uniform torn and dirty. Behind him, Jake could see the flashing lights of weapon fire and hear the sounds of battle. Human ships, Zefkai said, breathing heavily. Thank the spirits you have come. We have been fighting for 6 days. The swarm landed forces across the entire planet. We are down to our last defensive positions. Admiral Carter leaned forward. Commander, we need tactical information. How many enemy forces are you facing? Thousands, Zefkai replied. Maybe millions. They keep growing. They take our fallen soldiers and turn them into more of themselves. Every battle makes them stronger. Jake studied the scans of the planet. The swarm had built massive hive structures where cities used to be. The organic buildings pulsed like living hearts, probably creating more soldiers every minute. Admiral, Jake said on a private channel, we need to get ground forces down there fast. Every minute we wait, the enemy gets stronger. Carter nodded. Colonel Rick Hayes, prepare your Marines for immediate deployment. Full combat load. On the troop transport ships, Colonel Hayes was already suiting up his soldiers. The Marines wore powered armor that made them look like mechanical monsters. Their weapons were designed to fight in any environment, from the vacuum of space to the crushing depths of ocean worlds. "Listen up," Hayes told his troops over the radio. "These aliens were helping fight with energy weapons and shields. They try to disable enemies, not kill them. They've been getting slaughtered because they're too nice." Sergeant Amy Cole checked her rifle and smiled grimly. "So we show them how Earth boys and girls fight?" "Exactly," Hayes replied. "These swarm things think they're the scariest predators in the galaxy. Time to prove them wrong." The first human dropships launched toward the planet's surface while Admiral Carter's warships engaged the swarm fleet in orbit. The alien vessels looked like they had been grown rather than built, with organic curves and pulsing veins of light. Jake watched the space battle from the bridge of his ship. Human weapons fired solid projectiles and explosive missiles, while the aliens used energy beams and plasma bolts. The difference in fighting style was immediately obvious. "Their ships are trying to disable ours," Amy reported. "They're targeting engines and weapons, not trying to destroy us completely." "And our ships?" Jake asked. "We're blowing them apart," she said with satisfaction. Admiral Carter ordered all weapons to target their command centers. No prisoners, no disabled ships, just destruction. On the planet's surface, Colonel Hayes led the first wave of Marines into battle against the Devourer swarm. The creatures were as horrible as the intelligence reports had described. 8-foot-tall insect-like monsters with metal claws and weapons that seemed to be part of their bodies. But the swarm had never fought humans before. The first group of creatures charged at Hayes's Marines like they had charged at the Valerian defenders. They expected the humans to fall back and try to preserve their lives. Instead, Sergeant Cole threw a grenade into the middle of the charging group and then rushed forward with her squad, screaming battle cries that echoed through the ruins. The swarm creatures stopped in confusion. Their prey was supposed to run away, not attack. That moment of confusion was all the humans needed. Cole's squad opened fire with weapons that had been designed to kill dangerous predators on Earth. Bullets that could penetrate the hide of a charging elephant tore through the swarm's natural armor. Grenades that could collapse mine tunnels shattered their formations. "This is Cole," the sergeant reported over the radio. "First contact successful. These things are tough, but they die when you shoot them enough times." Hayes smiled inside his helmet. "All units advance and engage. Show them what Deathworlders can do." The battle that followed shocked both the swarm and the Valerian defenders. The humans fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. When outnumbered, they didn't retreat. They called for backup and fought harder. When surrounded, they didn't surrender. They formed circles and fought in all directions at once. Commander HFY watched from his command post as human Marines charged through swarm positions that had held back Valerian forces for days. The humans used weapons and tactics that horrified him: chemical explosives in enclosed spaces, flame units that burned everything in their path, soldiers who kept fighting even when badly wounded. "They're insane," one of his officers said, watching a human squad fight their way into a swarm hive structure. "No," HFY said quietly. "They're from a death world. This is normal for them." Inside the hive, Sergeant Cole led her squad through tunnels filled with swarm drones. The creatures tried to overwhelm them with numbers, but the humans had trained for exactly this situation. They moved in coordinated pairs, covering each other's backs, using explosives to collapse tunnels behind them to prevent being surrounded. "Cole to Hayes," she radioed. "We've reached the central chamber." "This thing is huge, sir. Looks like some kind of breeding facility." "Destroy it," Hayes ordered. "Use everything you have." Cole looked at the massive organic structure that pulsed with alien life. Thousands of swarm creatures were being born in biomechanical pods. "With pleasure, sir." The explosions could be seen from orbit as human demolition charges turned the hive into a crater. Across the planet, other Marine units were doing the same thing to other swarm positions. By the end of the first day, the tide of battle had completely changed. The swarm forces that had been winning for 6 days were now in full retreat. The creatures that had consumed 17 star systems had met their match in the humans from Earth. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching reports come in from all across the planet. "Casualties?" she asked. "Lighter than expected," her aide reported. "The enemy wasn't prepared for our tactics. They seem confused by opponents who actually want to fight." Jake received a communication from Commander HFY. The Valerian looked exhausted but hopeful for the first time in days. "Fleet Commander Morrison," HFY said. On behalf of my people, I thank you. We had given up hope. Don't thank us yet, Jake replied. This is just one planet. We need to find the main swarm fleet and stop them before they consume any more worlds. As night fell on Kesson 7th, human marines set up defensive positions around the liberated Valerian cities. For the first time since the swarm invasion began, the defenders were winning. The galaxy was about to learn that deathworlds produce the most dangerous predators of all. News of the human victory at Kesson 7th spread across the galaxy faster than light. For the first time since the Devourer swarm began their expansion, an alien fleet had been not just stopped, but completely destroyed. On peaceful worlds throughout the galaxy, beings who had prepared for death began to hope again. Fleet Commander Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room of the UES Defiance, studying holographic star maps with Admiral Carter and her senior officers. Red dots marked swarm-controlled systems, while blue dots showed the locations of human forces. Intelligence reports indicate the main swarm fleet is here, Admiral Carter said, pointing to a cluster of red dots near the galactic rim. 300 ships, including their primary hive vessels. If we can destroy those, we cut off their ability to reproduce. Colonel Hayes, now promoted to general after his success on Kesson 7th, shook his head. Admiral, 300 ships against our 200. Even with our tactical advantages, those aren't good odds. Dr. Nina Foster looked up from her research station. The xenobiologist had been studying captured swarm technology for weeks. Actually, I think we have a bigger advantage than we realize. She activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a swarm creature. I've been analyzing their communication methods. They don't use radio or quantum signals like we do. They use biochemical markers, chemical signals that tell each other what to do. Jake leaned forward, like ants following scent trails. Exactly, Nina said excitedly. But it's more than that. Their entire command structure depends on these chemical signals. The bigger creatures tell the smaller ones what to do by releasing specific chemicals. Lieutenant Commander Pete Davis, the fleet's electronic warfare specialist, saw where she was going. If we could disrupt those signals, we could turn their coordination against them, Nina finished. I've been working on a weapon that releases chemical compounds that confuse their communication system. Instead of receiving orders, they would receive contradictory signals. Admiral Carter studied the data. How do we deploy this weapon? We need to get close, Nina explained. The chemicals have to be released directly into their ship atmospheres. It won't work from long range. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Getting close to 300 enemy ships meant accepting massive casualties. I'll do it, Jake said quietly. Take a small fast fleet, break through their lines, and deploy the weapon at close range. That's suicide, General Hayes protested. Maybe, Jake replied. But sitting here while they consume more worlds is definitely death for billions of aliens. At least this gives us a chance. 3 days later, Jake led a strike force of 12 ships toward the main swarm fleet. His crew was all volunteers, people who understood they probably wouldn't be coming back. Amy Rodriguez sat at her communications station, calm and professional despite knowing what they faced. Approaching the target system, reported Navigation Officer Tim Parker. Swarm fleet detected at the edge of sensor range. Jake looked at the tactical display. The enemy ships were arranged around a massive biomechanical structure that pulsed with organic light. According to intelligence reports, it was a mobile hive factory that could produce thousands of swarm creatures every hour. All ships, this is Morrison, Jake announced over the fleet radio. Remember the plan. We punch through their outer defenses, get as close as possible to that hive ship and deploy Dr. Foster's weapon. After that, we run like hell. The human ships accelerated toward the enemy fleet at maximum speed. The swarm vessels turned to meet them, forming the same defensive patterns they had used to destroy galactic fleet after galactic fleet. But human tactics were different. Instead of trying to preserve their ships, the human captains drove straight at the enemy formations. When swarm weapons damaged their engines, they kept flying on momentum. When their shields failed, they used their armor. When their armor was breached, they sealed the damaged sections and kept fighting. Captain Sarah Mitchell's ship, the UES Thunder, took a direct hit that would have destroyed most vessels. Instead, she ordered all power transferred to engines and rammed her damaged ship directly into a swarm cruiser. Both ships exploded, but the gap in the enemy line allowed other human vessels to push through. We're through their outer defenses, Amy reported, as explosions flashed around their ship. Hive ship is 2,000 kilometers ahead. Jake could see the massive enemy vessel on the main screen. It was more like a living planet than a ship, covered in organic structures that birthed new swarm creatures. Smaller vessels swarmed around it like antibodies protecting a vital organ. "Deploy the weapon," Jake ordered. Dr. Foster activated her chemical disruptor from the science station. Clouds of invisible compounds spread from the human ships toward the swarm fleet. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the enemy formation began to fall apart. Swarm ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly turned on each other. Creatures that had been working together started fighting. The chemical signals that told them friend from enemy were scrambled, and their hive mind became chaos. "It's working," Amy shouted as swarm vessels began destroying each other. "Their entire fleet is attacking itself." But the victory came at a cost. Only 4 human ships survived the attack run. Jake's own vessel was badly damaged, with hull breaches on 3 decks and main engines offline. "Admiral Carter, this is Morrison." Jake radioed to the main fleet waiting at the edge of the system. "Package delivered. The enemy fleet is neutralized. Recommend immediate advance to finish them off." Admiral Carter's voice came back strong and clear. "Outstanding work, Jake. All ships advance and engage. Let's end this." The main human fleet swept into the system to find the swarm in complete disarray. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated were now attacking randomly. The great hive ship that had birthed countless horrors was tearing itself apart as its own defenses turned inward. On the devastated world of Korath, Major Kate Williams received word of the victory while defending the last evacuation site. Her battalion had been holding off swarm ground forces for 3 days, protecting alien refugees who couldn't fight for themselves. "Major," her radio operator called out, "Admiral Carter reports the main swarm fleet has been destroyed. All remaining forces are cut off from reinforcement." Williams looked out at the swarm creatures still attacking her positions. They were fewer now and seemed confused without direction from their hive mind. "All units, this is Williams. Time to go on the offensive. Show these bugs how humans finish a fight." The final battle for Korath lasted 6 hours. Human Marines, supported by alien survivors who had learned to fight like humans, swept across the planet destroying the last swarm positions. By sunset, the world was free. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Swarm forces that had seemed unstoppable were now isolated and confused. Human task forces hunted them down systematically, using the aggressive tactics that had shocked the galaxy. In the wreckage of the main swarm fleet, rescue ships found Jake and his surviving crew. As medical teams worked to save the wounded, Admiral Carter contacted him by radio. "Jake, you did it. The swarm is in full retreat across the galaxy. Intelligence estimates they've lost 60% of their forces." Jake smiled weakly from his hospital bed. "Good. Maybe now the galaxy can sleep safely." But even as the immediate threat ended, everyone knew that everything had changed. The peaceful civilizations that had called for help had learned that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. And humanity had announced to the galaxy that Earth's children were ready to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The age of human guardianship had begun. 6 months after the first desperate plea for help, Ambassador Kethvar stood once again in the Galactic Council chambers. But everything had changed. The elegant hall that had once echoed with philosophical debates now buzzed with military planning and defense coordination. Representatives who had never thought about warfare now studied tactical reports and fleet movements. The holographic displays that had once shown art and cultural achievements now tracked the locations of human patrol fleets across the galaxy. Green dots marked safe zones where the last remnants of the Devourer swarm had been eliminated. Blue dots showed human ships standing guard over trade routes that had been abandoned for months. "The final swarm hive cluster has been destroyed," Kethvar announced to the assembled council. "The threat to our civilizations is officially ended." The chamber erupted in celebration. The crystal lithoids rang like beautiful bells. The gas-dwelling Nephilae flashed brilliant colors of joy. Even the ancient Zenturans allowed themselves to show emotion, their bark-like faces creasing into what might have been smiles. Speaker Veltara called for order. "Before we celebrate, we must formally thank those who saved us. I hereby invite President Rodriguez of Earth to address this council." The massive view screen activated, showing President Alex Rodriguez sitting in the Oval Office on Earth. Behind him stood Admiral Lisa Carter and Dr. Nina Foster, both wearing the new medals that Earth had created to honor those who had fought in the Galactic War. Honored members of the Galactic Council, President Rodriguez began. 6 months ago, you asked humanity for help. Today, the threat to peaceful civilizations has been eliminated, but our work is not finished. He gestured to a star map showing human ships positioned throughout the galaxy. My military commanders informed me that threats like the Devourer swarm could emerge again, whether from unknown regions of space or from species that choose conquest over cooperation. Therefore, Earth formally offers to establish a permanent defense network to protect all member worlds of the Galactic Council. The silence in the chamber was profound. No species in galactic history had ever offered to be the military protector of other civilizations without demanding tribute or territory in return. Council member Thisara, who had once called humans barbaric savages, spoke first. What would humanity ask in return for this protection? President Rodriguez smiled. Trade partnerships, cultural exchange, and the promise that these defenses will only be used to protect the innocent. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to make sure nobody else does either. Lord Quexton of the Aquatic Aquarians raised one of his tentacled arms. How do we know that humanity won't become the threat? You possess the most powerful military force the galaxy has ever seen. Admiral Carter stepped forward. Because, Lord Quexton, we've already had the chance to conquer you. When our fleets were distributed across your space fighting the swarm, we could have taken control of any world we wanted. Instead, we protected them and left when the job was done. Dr. Foster added, our species evolved on a world that taught us to defend our community against outside threats. We don't want to dominate others. We want to make sure everyone is safe to live their lives in peace. The debate that followed lasted hours. Some council members worried about becoming dependent on human protection. Others feared that humanity's violent nature might eventually turn against them. But in the end, fear of future threats outweighed fear of their protectors. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would become the official guardians of galactic peace. Fleet Commander Jake Morrison, now fully recovered from his injuries, received word of the Council's decision while aboard his new flagship, the UES Guardian. He was leading a mixed patrol fleet, human warships flying alongside alien vessels whose crews had volunteered to learn human military tactics. Congratulations, Admiral Morrison, said Commander Zefkai over the communication system. The Valerian had requested assignment to Jake's fleet, wanting to learn from the humans who had saved his world. Jake smiled at his new rank. After the war, Earth had restructured its military to handle galactic responsibilities. Thank you, Commander. How are your people adapting to our training methods? It is difficult, Zefkai admitted. We are not used to thinking like predators, but we understand the necessity. The galaxy needs guardians who can think like the threats we might face. Through the viewports of his ship, Jake could see the mixed fleet conducting training exercises. Sleek alien vessels practiced formation flying with angular human warships. Crews that had never fired a weapon in anger learned how to coordinate devastating attacks against imaginary enemies. On Earth, the transformation was just as dramatic. Military academies that had trained officers to fight on one world now taught tactics for protecting dozens of species across hundreds of star systems. Shipyards that had built vessels for exploring and mining now produced the guardians that would patrol trade routes and defend peaceful worlds. General Kate Williams, now in charge of training alien forces, stood before a mixed class of human and alien officers. The key to effective defense, she explained, is not just knowing how to fight. It's knowing when to fight and when the threat of fighting is enough. A young aviarian officer raised her feathered wing. General Williams, my people fear that learning human tactics will make us more violent. Williams nodded, understanding. Violence and aggression are not the same thing. A parent protecting their child is not violent. They're protective. We're teaching you to be protective of innocent life, not aggressive toward it. The changes went beyond military matters. Human exploration ships now traveled with alien scientists, sharing discoveries and building relationships between species. Trade routes that had been cut off during the swarm invasion reopened. But now with human escorts ensuring safe passage, Dr. Nina Foster found herself leading the new Galactic Research Initiative, coordinating scientific cooperation between species that had barely communicated before the crisis. The universe is vast and full of mysteries, she told a gathering of alien scientists. We can learn so much more by working together than we ever could alone. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy thought about conflict. The peaceful civilizations that had been helpless against the swarm now understood that sometimes the only answer to evil was force. They began to develop their own defensive capabilities, guided by human advisors but reflecting their own values and needs. Years later, Ambassador Kethvar would often stand in the observation deck of the new Galactic Defense Coordination Center, watching human and alien ships working together to patrol the galaxy. He thought about the day his people had faced extinction and the desperate decision to contact the Deathworlders from Earth. "Do you ever regret asking us for help?" Admiral Morrison asked, joining him at the viewport. Jake was older now, with gray in his hair from years of commanding galactic defense fleets. Kethvar considered the question. "There was a time when my people thought humans were too dangerous to trust. Now I understand that you are dangerous to those who threaten the innocent." That is exactly what the galaxy needed. A young officer approached them, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, now a senior communications specialist coordinating between human and alien forces. "Admiral, we're receiving reports of unknown ships at the galactic edge. They don't match any known species profile." Jake and Kethvar exchanged looks. In the years since the Swarm War, several other threats had emerged from the unknown regions of space. Each time, the combined forces of the Galactic Defense Network had been ready. "Alert all patrol fleets," Jake ordered. "Let's go see what's out there." As alarms sounded throughout the station, human and alien crews rushed to their ships. The mixed fleets that had seemed impossible years before now moved with practiced coordination. Warriors from peaceful worlds flying alongside predators from a death world, united in the defense of innocent life. The galaxy had learned that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of those willing to fight for what was right. And somewhere in the depths of space, other threats might be learning that this galaxy was protected by humans, the Deathworlders who had answered a desperate plea and stayed to guard the innocent. The age of galactic peace had begun, built on the foundation of humanity's promise that no one who called for help would ever stand alone again.